She was alone at the event when the billionaire leaned close and whispered, "Pretend to be my wife." What Vanessa Williams said next would leave him momentarily speechless, and quietly rearrange the balance of power in a room full of people who believed they controlled everything. Before the night swallowed her whole, Vanessa paused just inside the doors of the ballroom and wondered briefly, irrationally, if it was still possible to turn around and pretend she had never come. The chandeliers were too bright, the laughter too practiced. The confidence in the room felt inherited, not earned. She adjusted the borrowed navy blue dress Jennifer had insisted looked timeless, even though Vanessa could feel every unfamiliar seam reminding her it wasn't really hers. The heels pinched. Her smile felt borrowed too, something she had put on out of habit, not hope. She wasn't supposed to be here. She knew it with the kind of certainty that didn't require proof. 3 weeks ago, her life still made sense. 2 weeks ago, it still had a direction. Tonight, it had champagne she didn't want and conversations she wasn't invited into. Jennifer had been relentless. "Just come," she'd said over the phone, her voice warm with the kind of optimism Vanessa didn't trust anymore. One night. Free food, important people, and maybe, just maybe, a reminder that your life isn't over. Vanessa had laughed then. A short, humorless sound. "My life isn't over," she'd replied. "It's just temporarily embarrassing." "That's not a phase," Jennifer had said. "That's a plot point." So Vanessa came. Now she stood near the edge of the ballroom, a half step removed from the center of gravity, watching clusters of people orbit one another with effortless familiarity. Politicians smiled as if their faces had been trained for it. Business leaders gestured with hands that wore watches worth more than Vanessa's rent when she'd still had an apartment to call hers. A woman in emerald silk glanced at Vanessa, then away, as if her eyes had slid off something unimportant. Invisible, Vanessa thought. Or maybe just misplaced. She picked up a champagne flute from a passing tray. Not because she wanted it, but because it gave her hands something to do. The bubbles rose, delicate and persistent, and she wondered how something so light could cost so much. 3 weeks ago, she'd had a job she was good at. Not glamorous, but steady. 2 weeks ago, she'd had a fiancé who'd promised forever and delivered a quiet betrayal instead. Tonight, she had neither. The breakup had been swift, efficient, almost polite. "I didn't plan for it to happen like this," he'd said, eyes already elsewhere. "It just did," she'd replied, because what else was there to say? The eviction notice followed soon after, tucked neatly behind the realization that the apartment had never technically been hers. She pushed the thoughts away now, pressing her lips together as she scanned the room for Jennifer. No luck. Probably trapped backstage fixing something that had gone wrong, because Jennifer was the kind of person people relied on when things did. Vanessa drifted toward a tall window overlooking the city, drawn to the quiet it promised. From here, she could watch without participating. Stay for an hour. Leave with dignity. Go home and eat something comforting straight from the container. It was a solid plan. On the other side of the room, Brandon Davies was calculating exits. He stood near the center of the ballroom because that was where people expected him to be. Tall, composed. Perfectly tailored tuxedo. The kind of man whose presence subtly shifted conversations when he entered a space not because he demanded attention, but because he attracted it. At 35, Brandon had built a reputation on precision. He believed in preparation, leverage, and control. Markets bent when he applied pressure. Narratives shifted when he spoke. Tonight, none of that seemed to matter. "Brandon," Catherine said, her voice smooth as polished glass, "you've been avoiding me." He turned with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I've been circulating, same as everyone else. Always circulating away from me," she replied, stepping closer. Her hand brushed his sleeve, lingering just long enough to be noticed. People were watching. They always were. Catherine was beautiful in the way magazines approved of. Blonde, poised, impeccably dressed. For months, She had been everywhere. Brandon was always smiling, always suggesting without ever saying anything outright. To the press, to donors, to anyone who asked. Every denial Brandon offered only seemed to sharpen the rumors. People are starting to think we're something we're not, Brandon said evenly. Catherine tilted her head. People think many things. They certainly do. Her smile widened. For instance, they're thinking it would be wonderful if we did an interview together. You know, for that business program. My publicist said the host is very interested. Brandon felt his jaw tighten. I don't discuss my personal life publicly. But your personal life is so interesting, she replied, fingers brushing his arm again. Especially when it involves such pleasant company. He needed an exit. Now. Brandon's gaze moved across the room, searching for something, anything that would allow him to disengage without creating another headline. That was when he saw her. She wasn't talking. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to be seen. She stood by the window, champagne untouched, eyes sharp with awareness and fatigue. There was a quiet intelligence in her posture, a kind of restraint that suggested she was choosing observation over participation. Real, Brandon thought. And real was exactly what he needed. He made a decision in 3 seconds. It wasn't like him to act on impulse, but desperate situations required proportional responses. If you'll excuse me, he said to Catherine, not waiting for her reply. Vanessa noticed the man approaching and immediately checked behind her, half expecting to find someone important she had accidentally stood in front of. There was no one, just her reflection in the glass and the city lights beyond. The man stopped beside her. Up close, he was even more composed than he'd looked from across the room. Broad shoulders, clean lines, eyes that seemed to assess situations as easily as breathing. She recognized him instantly. Brandon Davies, the name attached to billion-dollar deals and front-page articles. The kind of man people pointed out in rooms like this, even when he wasn't trying to be noticed. Good evening, he said, voice low and controlled. Good evening, Vanessa replied cautiously. There was a pause. Brandon glanced over his shoulder, just long enough for her to notice the woman in emerald silk watching them intently. Then he leaned in, lips close to her ear, his smile casual enough for anyone watching from a distance. Pretend to be my wife. Vanessa didn't react immediately. She counted to 2. Exactly 2. Then she turned to face him, one eyebrow lifting. I'm sorry, she said calmly. What? My wife, he repeated softly, maintaining the polite expression expected of him. Just for tonight. There's a situation I need to avoid. Vanessa looked at him, then at the woman across the room, then back at him. You're asking me, she said slowly, as if translating from another language, to pretend I'm married to you. Yes, because you can't simply say no to a woman. Brandon blinked. That was not the response he'd anticipated. It's more complicated than that. Seems pretty simple to me. She crossed her arms. Let me see if I understand. You, a successful man with lawyers, publicists, and probably an assistant for your assistants, need a complete stranger to pose as your wife because you can't handle an insistent socialite. When she put it that way, it did sound ridiculous. That's because it is ridiculous, she added. Something about her tone disarmed him. The frankness, the lack of awe, the sharp humor delivered without cruelty. I can compensate you, Brandon offered. Vanessa tilted her head. Compensate me how? A gift card? A fruit basket? A pony? Whatever you want. What I want, she said, studying him now, is to understand why you're doing this. Brandon hesitated, then nodded slightly toward Catherine. She's been implying a relationship that doesn't exist, he said quietly. Every denial turns into speculation. My company is in a delicate position. I need the narrative to change. Vanessa considered him for a long moment. And your solution is to invent a wife. To introduce one, he corrected. Someone she doesn't know. Someone outside this circle. Someone convincing. Someone like me. Exactly. She let out a short laugh. You don't know anything about me. I know you're alone at this event. I know you don't want to be here. And I know you seem completely unaffected by all of this. He gestured subtly toward the room, which tells me you won't panic if you have to improvise. Or it tells you I'm unstable. You don't look unstable. The unstable ones never do, Vanessa replied. It's part of the charm. He almost smiled. So, Brandon said quietly, are you going to help me or not? Vanessa looked around the room, at the polished smiles, the careful conversations. She thought about the apartment she no longer had, the job she was quietly mourning, the life that had unraveled faster than she'd been ready for. Of all the absurd things that could happen tonight, pretending to be a billionaire's wife didn't even rank in the top 5. All right, she said. Brandon looked surprised. All right, she repeated, but I have conditions. Conditions? You don't treat me like an accessory. If we're pretending, we're partners. She met his gaze. And if this gets uncomfortable, I walk away. He nodded slowly. Agreed. And one more thing, she added. You owe me dinner. A real one. No press. For the first time that night, Brandon Davies smiled. He offered his arm. Vanessa took it, and together, they stepped back into the center of the ballroom. Just as the room began to notice, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and comment the city you're watching from. This is only the beginning. The moment Vanessa took Brandon's arm, the room changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no gasp, no sudden silence, just a subtle shift like the air itself had tilted. Conversations paused half a beat too long. Heads turned. A few smiles stiffened, recalculating. Vanessa felt it immediately. So this is what it feels like to be visible, she thought. Brandon's arm was steady beneath her hand, warm through the fabric of his jacket. He walked as if nothing unusual were happening, as if escorting a woman through a ballroom full of power brokers was the most natural thing in the world. You're very calm, she murmured without looking at him. I've been told that before. That wasn't a compliment. I know. She huffed quietly, fighting the urge to smile. As they moved deeper into the crowd, Vanessa became acutely aware of the woman in emerald silk. Catherine. The way her gaze tracked them was unmistakable, sharp, assessing, already rewriting assumptions in real time. She noticed, Vanessa said softly. Brandon's jaw tightened. She always does. They were intercepted almost immediately by a man with silver hair and a smile polished by decades of fundraising dinners. Brandon, he said warmly, I didn't realize you had company tonight. Brandon didn't hesitate. His hand settled lightly at the small of Vanessa's back, not possessive, but present. This is Vanessa, he said. My wife. The word landed with surprising weight. The man's eyebrows lifted. Your wife? Vanessa smiled before Brandon could speak again, tilting her head just slightly. Since last spring, she said smoothly. He spilled coffee on me and decided marriage was the only reasonable apology. There it was again, that quick flash of something in Brandon's eyes. Surprise, admiration, relief. The man laughed. Well, congratulations are clearly in order. Thank you, Vanessa replied. We're still adjusting. As the man moved on, Brandon leaned closer. Coffee. Classic, she said. Believable. Low maintenance. You're good at this. I'm good at not being intimidated, she corrected. There's a difference. They didn't get far before another group formed around them. Introductions blurred together names. Vanessa knew she wouldn't remember. Faces she recognized only because they'd been on magazine covers. She shook hands, made jokes. Let Brandon fill in gaps when questions edged too close to specifics. You seem very grounded, a woman in pearls remarked, studying Vanessa with open curiosity. Someone has to be, Vanessa said lightly. He lives in spreadsheets. Brandon smiled. A real one this time. Across the room, Catherine watched. Vanessa didn't need to look to feel it the way attention sharpened when it became hostile. She caught Catherine's eye just long enough to register the change. The smile was still there, but it had gone brittle. You weren't kidding, Vanessa murmured as they drifted toward a quieter corner near the bar. She's furious. She's not used to losing control, Brandon said. Especially publicly. Vanessa glanced up at him. So this is about control. This is about perception, he corrected. And perception becomes leverage. She studied his face, the calm, precision, the way every word was chosen carefully. And I'm leverage. For tonight, he said. Only if you want to be. Vanessa stopped walking. He stopped with her. This is where we clarify something, she said, meeting his gaze squarely. I don't do disposable roles. If I'm standing next to you, I'm not decoration. I won't be talked over, corrected, or quietly erased if someone decides I don't belong. Brandon didn't interrupt. And if this turns into a spectacle, she continued, or if I'm humiliated to make a point, I walk. No explanations. He nodded slowly. That's fair. And I want to be clear, Vanessa added. This doesn't make me yours. It doesn't, he agreed. Good. A beat passed between them, something unspoken but acknowledged. Then we're aligned, Brandon said. Equal footing. Full autonomy. No humiliation. And if I say stop? We stop. She searched his expression for hesitation and found none. All right, she said finally. Then let's finish this. They turned back toward the crowd together. The introduction spread faster than Vanessa expected. Whispers threaded through conversations. Curious glances multiplied. A few people approached under the guise of congratulations, clearly more interested in observation than celebration. Where did you meet? Someone asked. She already told you, Brandon replied smoothly. Coffee. I was careless. She was unimpressed, Vanessa added. Still is. Laughter followed. The tension eased just enough. Catherine made her move then. She approached with perfect timing, her smile warm, her posture open. Anyone watching would see nothing but cordial curiosity. Brandon, she said, air kissing his cheek. You didn't tell me you were married. It didn't come up, he replied evenly. Her gaze slid to Vanessa. And you must be? Vanessa, she said, offering her hand. It's nice to finally meet you. Catherine took it, grip firm. How surprising. You appeared out of nowhere. So did he. Vanessa replied pleasantly. I suppose that's how these things happen. The smile on Catherine's face tightened almost imperceptibly. And what do you do, Vanessa? She asked. I listen, Vanessa said, and occasionally interrupt when people get boring. A ripple of amusement moved through the small cluster that had formed around them. Brandon felt it, the shift in energy. The way Vanessa didn't shrink under scrutiny but met it head-on. Well, Catherine said after a moment, releasing Vanessa's hand. I hope we'll be seeing more of each other. I'm sure we will, Vanessa replied. Catherine lingered just long enough for the moment to stretch, then turned away. The instant she was gone, Vanessa exhaled slowly. She's going to investigate me, she said. Yes. And you're okay with that? Brandon hesitated. I won't let it go far. Vanessa arched a brow. You don't control how far curious people go. No, he admitted. But I control how much access they get. They were interrupted again, this time by a journalist Vanessa recognized from television. He congratulated Brandon warmly, eyes flicking between them with professional interest. "Careful," Vanessa murmured under her breath. "That one's already writing the headline." "I know. And you're still calm?" "Less than I look." She smiled faintly. "Good. That means you're human." The evening blurred into a series of interactions, some genuine, some performative. Vanessa found her rhythm quickly, navigating conversations with humor and honesty, letting Brandon handle the specifics she didn't know. At one point, she caught her reflection in a mirrored column and barely recognized herself. Not because she looked different, but because she stood differently. Straighter. Surrounded. Seen. She glanced around and realized something that made her pulse quicken. They were watching her. Not as an accessory. Not as a curiosity. But as a presence. The realization was dizzying. Brandon noticed the shift in her posture, the way her shoulders squared as awareness settled in. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "I just realized something." "What?" "This isn't just your room," she said, eyes scanning the crowd. "They're watching me now, too." "Yes," he said softly. "They are." The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of something vast and unpredictable. Dangerous. Exhilarating. Vanessa tightened her grip on his arm, not for support, but for balance. "Guess we're committed," she said lightly. "For tonight," Brandon replied. She smiled, eyes bright. "For tonight." And as the room continued to watch, Vanessa Williams understood one thing with startling clarity. This wasn't just a favor anymore. It was a spotlight. If you're hooked, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on your notifications, and comment the city you're watching from. The story is just getting started. By the time Vanessa realized the lie had developed a pulse of its own, it was already too late to stop it. It moved through the ballroom quietly, at first whispered introductions, sidelong glances. The subtle recalibration that happened when powerful people decided something new mattered. She felt it in the way conversations curved toward her, in the way eyes lingered, measuring not just her dress or her smile, but her footing. "So," a woman with a diamond choker said, swirling her drink, "how does it feel to steal the most elusive bachelor in the room?" Vanessa didn't miss a beat. "I didn't steal him," she said pleasantly. He wandered off and decided to stay. Laughter rippled. Brandon angled his head, amused. "She keeps me," he added. "It's very efficient." Vanessa shot him a look. "You forgot to mention the coffee spill." He raised his hands in surrender. "I've learned my lesson." They were surrounded by people now, donors, executives, a senator's spouse who asked pointed questions disguised as compliments. Vanessa answered with warmth and humor, skirting details without sounding evasive. When she didn't know something, she reframed. When she sensed a trap, she turned it into a joke. It felt natural. Too natural. "You're enjoying this," Brandon murmured when they found a moment near the bar. "I'm surviving it," she corrected. "I'm not sure there is." She studied him. "You're smiling." "I always smile." "No," she said. "You perform pleasant neutrality. This is different." He considered that, then shrugged. "You're good company." The words surprised them both. Across the room, Dominic watched. He stood with a small group near the edge of the dance floor, tall, impeccably dressed, his expression easy in a way that suggested calculation rather than comfort. Dominic had the look of a man who liked puzzles, especially the kind that resisted being solved. When his gaze finally met Vanessa's, he smiled and raised his glass. "That's him," Brandon said quietly. "Dominic Hale." "The rival," Vanessa said. "You mentioned him." "He's curious." "About me." "About anything that shifts leverage." Dominic didn't approach immediately. He waited, observed, let the lie stretch and breathe. When he finally joined them, It was with the ease of someone who assumed he belonged anywhere he chose to stand. "Brandon," he said warmly. "You've been holding out on us." Brandon smiled, polite and distant. "Dominic, this is my wife, Vanessa." "Ah," Dominic said, eyes flicking to her with open interest. "So you're the reason he's been distracted." Vanessa returned his smile, matching his tone. "If by distracted you mean happier, I'll take the credit." Dominic laughed. "Confident. I like that." "I've been told it's a flaw." He tilted his head. "And what do you do, Vanessa?" She recognized the test instantly. The question wasn't about her job, it was about consistency, plausibility, cracks. "I consult," she said. "Communications, strategy, mostly listening, sometimes reframing." "Reframing what?" "Problems people insist on explaining badly." Brandon coughed, hiding a grin. Dominic's eyes sharpened. "Useful skill. Underrated," Vanessa agreed, "especially in rooms like this." There it was, the pause. The assessment. Dominic leaned back slightly, as if mentally checking boxes. "Well," he said after a moment, "welcome to the chaos." As he walked away, Brandon exhaled slowly. "He didn't buy it," Brandon murmured. "He didn't disprove it," Vanessa replied. "There's a difference." She felt the room tighten again, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. People were talking now, not just about Brandon, but about her, about the woman who'd appeared without warning and somehow fit. The lie wasn't collapsing. It was rooting itself. Catherine stood near the center of the room, phone angled discreetly as she typed. Her smile never wavered, but Vanessa could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her gaze flicked toward them and away. "She's mobilizing," Vanessa said. "Yes," Brandon replied. "She won't confront you directly again. She'll gather information. About me. About anything that proves this is temporary." Vanessa swallowed. "You said you'd limit access." "I will." "But you can't stop curiosity." "No," he admitted. "Only redirect it." They were interrupted again, this time by a man with a press badge clipped discreetly to his jacket. He congratulated Brandon warmly, eyes alight with interest. "May I ask how you two met?" he said. Vanessa smiled. "Coffee." "Of course," the man said. "Everyone meets over coffee these days." "It's a powerful beverage," Brandon added dryly. The journalist chuckled. "Mind if I grab a quick photo?" Brandon hesitated just long enough for Vanessa to notice. "Sure," she said before he could answer. Brandon shot her a look. She shrugged. The flash went off once, then twice. As the journalist moved on, Vanessa felt something settle in her chest, heavy, undeniable. "This is going to be public," she said. "It already is," Brandon replied quietly. "We just don't know how loudly yet." They moved through the rest of the evening in tandem, a practiced rhythm forming between them. Vanessa learned his tells, the way his jaw tightened when a question pressed too close, the subtle nod he gave when he wanted her to take the lead. Brandon learned hers, the slight tilt of her head when she was about to deflect, the quick smile that meant she'd decided to lean in rather than retreat. By the time the music softened and guests began to drift toward exits, the room felt settled. Brandon's name no longer carried the faint edge of speculation it had earlier. Conversations shifted back to business. Deals resumed. The tension that had followed him all evening dissipated. "It worked," Vanessa said quietly as they stood near the window again. "Yes," Brandon replied. "Better than I expected." She glanced at him. "That worries me." "It should." She laughed softly, then stopped when she noticed a man across the room lifting his camera again, this time aiming it directly at them, candid and unannounced. The shutter clicked. Vanessa's breath caught. Brandon turned too late. The lie, it seemed, had no intention of ending quietly. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and comment the city you're watching from. Things are about to get complicated. Vanessa woke to the sound of her phone vibrating against the nightstand like it was trying to escape. She groaned, rolling onto her side and pulling the pillow over her head. Whatever it was could wait. The night before still clung to her chandeliers. Laughter, Brandon's calm voice at her ear, the flash of a camera she hadn't been ready for. The phone vibrated again, then again. With a sigh, she reached for it, squinting at the screen through half-open eyes. Jennifer, 12 missed calls. Jennifer, 8 unread messages. Vanessa's stomach tightened. She unlocked the phone. The first thing that loaded wasn't a message. It was a headline. Billionaire Brandon Davies steps out with mystery wife. Who is she? Her breath caught. Below it, another. From eligible bachelor to married man? Brandon Davies' shocking appearance at charity gala. Her thumb hovered uselessly over the screen as she scrolled. Photos. Her face smiling, mid-sentence. Her hand on Brandon's arm. Their heads tilted toward each other, close enough to suggest intimacy. "Oh no," she whispered. The phone rang again. She answered without checking who it was. "Vanessa!" Jennifer's voice exploded through the speaker. "What did you do? What did you do?" Vanessa sat up abruptly, heart pounding. "I didn't do anything. I mean, I did something, but—" "You're everywhere," Jennifer said, breathless. "Everywhere. Morning shows, gossip sites, business blogs. My group chat is on fire. People are asking if I knew you were married to a billionaire." Vanessa swung her legs over the side of the bed, grounding herself on the cool floor. "I'm not married." "I know that," Jennifer said, "but the internet doesn't." Vanessa rubbed her temples. "It was supposed to be one night." "Well, congratulations," Jennifer replied dryly. "The night went viral." There was a knock at the door, sharp, insistent. Vanessa froze. "I'll call you back," she said quickly, ending the call before Jennifer could protest. She stood, smoothing her oversized t-shirt, and opened the door a crack. Brandon stood in the hallway. He looked different in daylight, less polished. The tux was gone, replaced by a dark coat and an expression that was carefully neutral but tight around the eyes. "Good morning," he said quietly. She opened the door fully. "You're early." "You're trending." That's one way to put it. He stepped inside, glancing around her small apartment, the thrift store couch, the stack of unopened mail on the counter, the faint smell of coffee she hadn't made yet. "I'm sorry," Brandon said after a moment. She let out a short laugh. "For what? The internet discovering I exist? For not stopping the photo." "You didn't know," she said. "Neither did I." They stood there, the silence thick with unasked questions. "My team is in crisis mode," Brandon said finally. "They've been calling since 6. Vanessa crossed her arms. "And what does crisis mode look like for a billionaire? Conference calls, legal assessments, media containment. And me?" He met her gaze. "That's the problem." Her phone buzzed again, this time with an unknown number. She ignored it. "They want to know who you are," Brandon continued. "Where you came from. Whether this is real." Vanessa swallowed. "And what are you telling them?" "That you're my wife." The words landed heavier in daylight. "They're asking how long we've been married," he added. "Why there was no announcement. Why no one in my inner circle knew. And your answers? That we're private. That the timing wasn't intentional." She shook her head slowly. "This is getting out of hand." "Yes," Brandon agreed. "Which is why we need to talk." He gestured toward the couch. She sat, motioning for him to do the same. "My PR director thinks the worst thing we can do right now is contradict the narrative," he said. "A denial would invite scrutiny. A correction would raise more questions." "So what do they suggest?" Vanessa asked. "That we lean into it." Her laugh was sharp. Of course they do. They believe the story stabilizes if it's consistent, Brandon said. Appearances, controlled messaging, time. Vanessa stared at him. You're asking me to keep pretending. I'm asking you to consider it, he replied carefully. For how long? We don't know yet. She stood abruptly, pacing the small space. You said one night. I know. And now I'm a headline. I know. She stopped, turning to face him. You don't get to act calm about this. This is my life. You're borrowing. I'm not calm, he said quietly. I'm contained. That stopped her. He took a breath. Catherine has already contacted 2 outlets. She's framing this as a publicity stunt. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Of course she is. If she succeeds, Brandon continued. The narrative flips. From private marriage to calculated deception. That damages my credibility. And drags me with it, Vanessa said. Yes. She looked down at her hands. Thought about the eviction notice folded in her drawer. The job applications unanswered. The uncertainty she'd been living with long before last night. What happens if I say no? She asked. Brandon didn't hesitate. The story unravels. The scrutiny intensifies. And you become the question everyone wants answered. She closed her eyes briefly. And if I say yes? Then we control the pace, he said. The exposure, the tone. She opened her eyes. You're offering me stability. I'm offering you insulation. The word lingered. I won't disappear into your world, Vanessa said slowly. I won't be managed like an asset. I wouldn't ask you to. And I need an exit, she added. A real one. You'll have it. She studied him, searching for cracks, for arrogance, for manipulation. She found none. Only tension, calculation, and something else she couldn't quite name. Where would I even stay? She asked quietly. Brandon hesitated. I have a guest suite. Separate entrance. No press access. Her laugh was soft, disbelieving. You're serious? Yes. She sank back onto the couch. This is insane. It is. And you're asking me anyway? Yes. Her phone buzzed again. This time she glanced at the screen. Unknown. We should talk, Kay. Catherine. Vanessa felt a chill. I need time, she said. You don't have much, Brandon replied gently. Dominic is already circling. As if summoned by the name, Brandon's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stilled. What? Vanessa asked. He looked up, expression unreadable. Dominic just hired a private firm, he said. A deep background search. Vanessa's pulse quickened. On me? Yes. The weight of it settled in the room. She was no longer just part of a story. She was a target. If this chapter pulled you in, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and comment the city you're watching from. The stakes are only getting higher. Vanessa learned 2 things within the first 24 hours of living the lie. First, Brandon Davies' guest suite was larger than her entire former apartment. Second, pretending not to notice the intimacy of proximity was far harder than pretending to be married. The suite sat on the opposite wing of Brandon's penthouse, separated by a long, quiet corridor lined with abstract art and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. It was elegant without being cold, soft lighting, neutral tones. A bed that looked like it belonged in a hotel where people stayed to escape consequences. This is temporary, Brandon said as he showed her around, his tone careful, professional. You'll have privacy. No staff without notice. Vanessa nodded, taking it in. It's generous. It's practical. She glanced at him. You really don't do sentiment, do you? He hesitated. I do. I just don't lead with it. That felt like an answer meant for more than the question. The first night passed quietly. Too quietly. Vanessa lay awake longer than she wanted to admit, listening to the unfamiliar hum of the city at this height, aware uncomfortably so that Brandon was only a few doors away. Close enough to feel. The next morning was worse. She padded into the kitchen in borrowed slippers to find Brandon already there, sleeves rolled up, coffee brewing. For a split second, they both froze. It was absurd after standing arm in arm in front of cameras and politicians, but somehow this felt more intimate. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he replied, then gestured toward the counter. "Coffee?" "Please." They stood in silence as he poured it, the mundane act grounding and strange all at once. "This is the part no one talks about," Vanessa said, accepting the mug. "The logistics." "The optics," Brandon corrected lightly. "No," she said, meeting his eyes. "The humanity." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You're right." The days that followed blurred into a rhythm neither of them had planned. There were meetings, some she attended, some she didn't. Public lunches, charity board check-ins, carefully timed arrivals and departures. Vanessa learned quickly when to step forward and when to let Brandon take the lead. Brandon learned when to stay quiet and let her speak. She was good with people. Not in the polished, rehearsed way he was used to, but in a way that disarmed without effort. At a donor luncheon, she listened more than she spoke, nodding at the right moments, asking questions that made people feel seen. When she did speak, it was with warmth and a self-awareness that felt refreshing in rooms full of posturing. "She's remarkable," Vanessa overheard a woman whisper once. "Not at all what I expected." Brandon heard it too, and something inside him shifted. He found himself looking forward to events he usually endured. Found himself watching the way Vanessa moved through rooms, how she laughed easily, how she met curiosity without defensiveness, how she never tried to impress. It was relaxing. "You don't perform," he said one evening as they rode in the back of a car, city lights streaking past the windows. "I refuse to," she replied. "People can tell when you're trying too hard." "You make it look effortless." She smiled faintly. "It's not. I just don't pretend it is." At home, the awkwardness softened into something gentler. They ate dinners together when schedules aligned. Watched the news in companionable silence. Occasionally argued over nothing of consequence, music volume, thermostat settings, whether takeout counted as cooking. Once, late at night, they found themselves laughing over a ridiculous story she told about a failed office holiday party from her old job. "You miss it," Brandon said quietly. She shrugged. "I miss being useful." "You are," he said without thinking. She looked at him, then really looked, and something unspoken passed between them. Across town, Catherine watched. She scrolled through photos, clips, headlines that refused to fade. "Billionaire's wife wins over donors. Who is the woman beside Brandon Davies?" The woman wasn't supposed to exist. Catherine met with her assistant in a private office, voice low, controlled. "I want everything," she said. "Education, employment, relationships, friends." "Already working on it," the assistant replied. "Good, because this ends soon." Back in the penthouse, Vanessa stood at the window one evening, watching the city pulse below. "I feel like I'm borrowing someone else's life," she said softly. Brandon joined her, standing close enough that their arms brushed. "You're not borrowing," he replied. "You're inhabiting." "That's worse." "Why?" "Because it's easier to lose something you've inhabited." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached for his phone as it buzzed. "I need to take this," he said, stepping away. Vanessa nodded, returning to the window. She wasn't trying to listen, but voices carried in quiet spaces. "It's working," Brandon said into the phone. The narrative stabilized. Investors are reassured. A pause. "Yes, I know it was supposed to be temporary." Another pause. No emotional risk. That was the point. Vanessa's chest tightened. She turned slowly, every word landing heavier than the last. "I'm not attached," Brandon continued. "It's strategic, a controlled situation." Silence. Vanessa stepped back, heart pounding. Controlled. Strategic. No emotional risk. She retreated quietly down the hall, the warmth of the past days cooling into something brittle and sharp. So that's what this was. A role. A calculation. She closed her door gently, leaning against it as the realization settled in. The lie hadn't just refused to die. It had started to feel real, and that scared her more than any headline ever could. If this chapter stirred something in you, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and comment the city you're watching from. The story is about to change. Vanessa didn't sleep that night. She lay on her side, staring at the faint glow of the city filtering through the curtains, replaying Brandon's voice in her head with ruthless precision. Strategic. Controlled. No emotional risk. The words hadn't been cruel. That was the problem. They'd been calm, measured, spoken the way people talked about investments that were performing exactly as expected. By morning, she had arranged her face into something neutral and taught her voice to behave. She emerged from the guest suite earlier than usual, already dressed, hair pulled back with deliberate neatness. Brandon was in the kitchen again, scrolling through his phone, coffee untouched beside him. "Morning," he said, looking up. "Morning." Her tone was polite, flat. He noticed immediately. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." He nodded, accepting it without probing. "We have a lunch with the Whitmore Foundation at noon. You don't have to come if—" "I'll be there," she said quickly. He hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes." The answer came too fast, too sharp. Brandon frowned slightly but let it go. At the luncheon, Vanessa played her role flawlessly. She smiled when expected, asked thoughtful questions, complimented donors without flattery. No one would have guessed that something inside her had shifted quietly, decisively, but Brandon felt it. She no longer leaned in when she spoke to him, no longer filled pauses with easy humor. When he reached for her hand under the table, a habit that had formed naturally, she let him, but her fingers remained still. Afterward, as they rode back in the car, the silence stretched. "You were quiet," Brandon said finally. "I was listening." "You always listen." "Yes," she replied. "That's part of the arrangement." The word hit him wrong. "Vanessa." "I'm fine," she said, eyes fixed on the window. "Just tired." He studied her reflection in the glass. She looked composed, distant. He didn't understand it. Back at the penthouse, Vanessa retreated to her room under the pretense of a headache. Brandon watched her go, a faint unease settling in his chest. This wasn't how it had been. The next few days followed the same pattern. Vanessa remained present but restrained, efficient where she'd once been playful, polite where she'd been warm. She no longer lingered in shared spaces or suggested dinners together. When Brandon spoke, she listened, but she didn't invite him in. "You don't have to disappear," he said one evening as she gathered her things after a short meeting with his PR team. "I'm not disappearing," she replied. "I'm staying in my lane." "That's not what I meant." "It's what you said," she countered softly. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. "What's wrong?" he asked instead. She met his gaze, searching for something, an apology perhaps, or honesty. But the memory of his voice on the phone stopped her. "I'm just adjusting," she said, "to the terms." He nodded slowly, unsettled. "If something's bothering you, you'll let me know?" she finished. "Of course." She walked away before he could respond. Across town, Catherine smiled. She sat in a quiet cafe with her assistant, phone resting on the table between them. The report was thorough, detailed, satisfying. "Unemployed," Catherine read aloud softly. "Recently ended engagement. Eviction notice filed last month. She looked up, eyes gleaming. How? Predictable. The assistant shifted uncomfortably. There's no scandal, nothing illegal, just instability. That's all I need, Catherine said. People like her don't belong in rooms like ours. They just need reminding. She closed the file. Arrange a meeting. With Vanessa? Yes. Alone. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Vanessa stepped out of a small cafe near the foundation offices, coffee in hand, phone pressed to her ear as she spoke quietly to Jennifer. I'm fine, she was saying. Really, just tired. She froze when she saw Catherine standing by the curb, immaculate as ever, sunglasses perched casually on her nose. I have to go, Vanessa murmured, ending the call. Catherine smiled as she approached. Vanessa, what a coincidence. Vanessa straightened. Is it? I thought we should talk, Catherine said lightly. Privately. Vanessa considered walking away. Instead, she nodded. All right. They stepped aside, away from foot traffic. Catherine removed her sunglasses, eyes sharp and assessing. You've adapted quickly, she said. Most people struggle with this world. Vanessa met her gaze. I'm managing. Yes. Catherine agreed. For now. The pause was deliberate. I know about your job. Catherine continued gently. And your fiancé. And the apartment. Vanessa felt the words land like cold water. That must have been difficult, Catherine added. To lose everything so suddenly. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Why are you telling me this? Because I think it's important you understand the situation you're in, Catherine said calmly. This arrangement, it's temporary. Vanessa's breath caught, just slightly. You're borrowing something that doesn't belong to you, Catherine went on. And when this ends, and it will, you'll be exactly where you started. She leaned closer, voice lowering. People like Brandon don't change their lives for convenience. Vanessa looked at her, heart pounding, anger simmering beneath the surface. You're done here, she said quietly. Catherine smiled. We'll see. As she walked away, Vanessa stood frozen, the city noise rushing back in around her. The fracture had begun. If this story hits you hard, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and comment the city you're watching from. The tension is about to explode. Catherine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Vanessa learned that quickly, standing on the sidewalk with the echo of Catherine's words still ringing in her ears, the city rushing past as if nothing had happened. That was Catherine's power. She never attacked outright. She planted truths like seeds and trusted them to grow sharp roots. Unemployed. Eviction notice. Temporary. Vanessa walked the remaining block to the car with her shoulders squared and her face carefully neutral. But by the time she closed the door behind her, her hands were shaking. She didn't tell Brandon. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even when he asked carefully, deliberately, if everything was all right. I'm fine, she said, because she had learned that fine was a shield. Thin, but serviceable. He accepted it, though uneasily. The next event came too soon. It was a private cocktail reception hosted by a venture capital group smaller than the Gala, quieter, and infinitely more dangerous. Fewer cameras, fewer strangers, more people who watched instead of spoke. Vanessa entered on Brandon's arm, her posture composed, her smile easy. On the surface, nothing had changed. Beneath it, everything felt exposed. She could feel eyes tracking her, assessing, recalibrating. The warmth she'd felt weeks ago had cooled into something sharper. Curious. Suspicious. Catherine stood near the bar, laughing softly at something a man beside her said. When her gaze met Vanessa's, she smiled. It was pleasant, polite. Vanessa's stomach tightened. Stay close, Brandon murmured, sensing the shift without understanding it. I am, Vanessa replied. Catherine drifted over moments later, drink in hand, the picture of gracious interest. Vanessa, she said warmly. You look well. Thank you, Vanessa replied. So do you. Catherine tilted her head. I hear you've been very busy. Foundations, boards, lunches. Quite a transition. Vanessa held her gaze. Life's full of them. Yes, Catherine agreed. Some more abrupt than others. The pause was subtle. The message wasn't. Brandon shifted slightly. Is there something you need, Catherine? Just conversation, she said smoothly. I was telling everyone how refreshing it is to see someone so adaptable. Her eyes flicked to Vanessa. Especially after such a difficult year. Vanessa felt the room lean in. Excuse me, Brandon said, tone polite but firm. We're needed over there. Catherine smiled. Of course. As they walked away, Vanessa exhaled slowly. She's circling, Brandon said under his breath. She already landed, Vanessa replied. He glanced at her. What do you mean? She shook her head. Nothing. It wasn't nothing. But she couldn't bring herself to say it not yet. Saying it would make it real. Would give Catherine more space in her life than she deserved. Then Dominic appeared. He intercepted Vanessa near the edge of the room while Brandon was momentarily pulled into conversation with a board member. Enjoying the spotlight? Dominic asked lightly, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He offered one. Vanessa hesitated, then accepted. I didn't realize it came with one. It always does, he said. Some people chase it. Others stumble into it. And which do you think I did? He smiled. That's what I'm trying to determine. She met his gaze steadily. Then you should ask. All right, Dominic said. How does someone go from nowhere to everywhere so quickly? Vanessa took a sip, buying time. Luck. Luck runs out. So does curiosity, she replied. Dominic chuckled. You're good. But you know what interests me most? She waited. Stability, he said. Investors like predictability, consistency, continuity. Vanessa felt the edge beneath the words. People aren't portfolios. No, Dominic agreed, but they affect them. He leaned in slightly. Brandon's image has stabilized recently. Yes, Vanessa said. That tends to happen when rumors stop, or when they're replaced. The implication hung between them. I hope you know, Dominic continued, voice still pleasant, that people will ask questions about timing, about motives. They always do, Vanessa said. And answers? He pressed. She smiled. That depends on the question. Dominic studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough. As he walked away, Vanessa felt the unmistakable sensation of being weighed and found wanting. Brandon found her moments later, concern etched into his expression. Dominic spoke to you, he said. Yes. What did he say? Nothing that sounded like something, she replied. Which usually means it was. He frowned. You should tell me if... I will, she said quickly. I promise. It was the first lie she'd told him that night. The drive home was quiet. Vanessa stared out the window, replaying every interaction, every pause that lingered a fraction too long. She felt it now clearly, unmistakably. She was being hunted. Not loudly, not openly, but deliberately. At the penthouse, she retreated to her room earlier than usual, exhaustion pressing down on her chest. She kicked off her shoes, sank onto the edge of the bed, and pressed her palms to her eyes. She didn't hear Brandon's phone ring. She didn't hear him answer. But she heard the shift in his voice when he realized who was calling. "Yes," Brandon said quietly. "I understand." A pause. "No, I didn't authorize that." Another pause. Vanessa's heart began to race. "Dominic," Brandon said, his tone sharpening. "You don't get to—" The call ended. Brandon stared at his phone, jaw tight. Across the city, a message was sent. A file attached. A story framed. Vanessa's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She glanced at the screen. Unknown. "You might want to see what's about to go public." Her breath caught as she opened the link. A draft headline stared back at her. "Billionaire's wife. The truth behind the sudden marriage." The lie had refused to die. And now it was sharpening its teeth. If this story kept you on edge, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and comment the city you're watching from. The storm is about to break. The countdown began with a notification. Vanessa stood in the doorway of her room, phone in hand, the glow of the screen casting sharp shadows across her face. The draft article Dominic had sent wasn't subtle. It wasn't speculative. It was precise dates, timelines, insinuations stacked neatly like evidence waiting for a verdict. Billionaire's wife. The truth behind the sudden marriage. She scrolled. Sources close to the situation claim. Questions surrounding employment history. A relationship born of convenience. Her chest tightened. The words felt invasive, surgical. Behind her, Brandon's voice cut through the silence. "How long?" She turned. He stood at the end of the hall, phone pressed to his ear, expression hard and distant. When he saw her face, he ended the call without another word. "They're running it," he said. "In 30 minutes. The number echoed. 30 minutes. "That's it?" Vanessa asked. "No injunction? No delay?" "My legal team is trying," Brandon replied, pacing now. "But the site's offshore. They've covered themselves, so we can't stop it." "No." The room felt suddenly smaller. Vanessa sank onto the edge of the couch, forcing herself to breathe. Brandon moved restlessly, every step controlled but frantic beneath the surface. "This is my fault," he said quietly. She looked up. "Don't." "I brought you into this," he continued. "I underestimated Dominic. I underestimated how quickly this would escalate." "You underestimated how disposable I'd look on paper," Vanessa said, the truth sharp but steady. He stopped pacing. "That's not—" "It is," she said. "And that's fine. But we don't have time for guilt." She stood. Brandon stared at her, caught between relief and disbelief. "Do you have a solution?" "Yes." He waited. "We flip it." His brow furrowed. "Flip what?" "The story," Vanessa said. "We don't deny it. We don't scramble. We tell it first." He shook his head. "That's reckless." "No," she countered. "That's control." He exhaled sharply. "Vanessa, if this comes out wrong—" "It already will," she said. "If we let them publish first, I become a footnote, a con, a woman who got lucky and overreached." She stepped closer. "If I speak first, I become a person." Brandon hesitated. "You're asking to go public." "I'm volunteering," she corrected. "There's a difference." He searched her face. "Why?" "Because I have nothing to lose," she said simply. "And you have everything." The words landed harder than she intended. "You think I don't care?" Brandon asked, voice tight. "I think you care strategically," Vanessa replied. "And I think that's why this hurts." Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they hadn't said. "I heard you," she continued softly. "That night, on the phone." His eyes widened. "Vanessa, you said it was temporary, controlled, no emotional risk." He looked away. That was before. Before it felt real? She finished. He didn't answer. The clock on the wall ticked. 22 minutes. I won't let them reduce me to a rumor, Vanessa said. If this ends, it ends on my terms. Brandon rubbed a hand over his face. What exactly are you proposing? She took a breath. We acknowledge the truth without handing them a weapon. Meaning, we admit the exaggeration, she said. We say we met unexpectedly, that the relationship moved faster than planned, that privacy was intentional, and the lie. We frame it as protection, Vanessa replied. Not manipulation. Two people caught in a situation that spiraled. Brandon considered it. They'll still accuse us of deception. Yes, she agreed, but they won't own the narrative. The clock ticked again. 15 minutes. His phone buzzed another message from his legal team. He glanced at it, then closed his eyes briefly. They can't stop it, he said. The best they can do is minimize damage after. Vanessa nodded. Then let's minimize it before. You'd be the one speaking, Brandon said slowly. Yes. You'll be torn apart. I've been torn apart before, she replied. This time I'll be standing. He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his expression shifted. Not calculation. Not control. Respect. Are you sure? He asked quietly. She nodded. I am. 10 minutes. Brandon reached for his phone, fingers steady now. I'll arrange it. Arrange what? A statement, he said. A live one. Controlled setting. No ambush. Vanessa swallowed. Live? They'll release the article either way, he said. If we go live first, it reframes everything. She exhaled slowly. All right. They moved quickly after that call's made. Cameras arranged. A small studio cleared in the penthouse. Vanessa stood in front of the mirror, smoothing her hair, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. You don't have to do this, Brandon said quietly from behind her. She met his gaze in the reflection. I want to. The countdown hit 5 minutes. Vanessa stepped toward the camera, heart pounding but steady. Ready? The producer asked. She nodded. Brandon watched from just off-screen, hands clenched at his sides. As the red light blinked on, Vanessa took a breath. I'll speak, she said. And with that, she stepped into the spotlight. Not as a rumor, not as a strategy, but as herself. If this story had your heart racing, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and comment the city you're watching from. The truth is about to change everything. The room went quiet in the way only expensive rooms ever did. Not silent, never silent, but muted, as if the air itself had decided to hold its breath. Vanessa stood in front of the camera with her hands loosely clasped, shoulders squared, chin lifted just enough to signal resolve without defiance. The studio lights were warm, flattering, unforgiving. There would be no shadows to hide in. She welcomed that. A producer adjusted a microphone at her collar. We're live in 3 minutes, she said gently, as if announcing a weather update instead of a public reckoning. Vanessa nodded. Thank you. Behind the glass, Brandon watched her with an expression he hadn't worn before. Uncertainty. Not about markets, not about consequences, about her. You don't have to explain everything, he said quietly, stepping closer. You can keep it high level. Vague. Vanessa turned to him. That's what they're expecting. That's what keeps you safe. She smiled faintly. Safe isn't the same as free. He hesitated. You could still walk away. She shook her head. Not anymore. He searched her face, clearly wanting to argue, then stopped. Something in her steadiness unsettled him in a way that was both terrifying and grounding. All right, he said finally. I trust you. The words landed heavier than any promise he could have made. Across town, Catherine stared at her phone, knuckles white. The alert had come through moments earlier. Live statement scheduled Brandon Davies' wife to speak. That wasn't the plan, Catherine muttered. Her assistant hovered nearby. The site is still running the exposé. I know, Catherine snapped. But if she speaks first. She didn't finish the sentence. Control was slipping. Not violently. Not obviously. But unmistakably. Catherine opened the draft she'd prepared, carefully curated leaks, anonymous quotes, insinuations wrapped in concern. She'd expected to release them into a vacuum. Instead, Vanessa was stepping into the light. No, Catherine said softly. This ends now. She typed quickly, sending messages, pushing contacts, trying to accelerate the narrative before it could be rewritten. Too late. Dominic's phone buzzed for the third time in 5 minutes. He paced the length of his office, jaw tight, replaying the notification that had just come through. Davies' camp goes live? Damage control or confession? This wasn't supposed to happen, he muttered. He'd counted on delay, on silence, on lawyers and hesitation. Vanessa wasn't hesitating. Pull the article forward, he barked into the phone. Run it now. We can't, came the reply. They're already live streaming. The optics. Then, frame it harder. Dominic snapped. Make it about deception. Make it about her. He ended the call, staring at the screen as thumbnails began to populate Vanessa's face, calm and centered, already circulating. The woman had changed the board. Back in the studio, the producer raised a hand. 1 minute. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly, not in fear, but in focus. She thought of her old apartment, the eviction notice folded and unfolded until the paper softened, the interviews that went nowhere. The nights she'd stared at the ceiling wondering how quietly a life could unravel. She thought of the ballroom, the whisper, the lie that had refused to die. And she thought of something Catherine and Dominic had never considered. She wasn't afraid of losing what she'd never truly had. Brandon stood just off camera now, close enough that she could feel his presence like a steady hum. Whatever happens, he said quietly, I'm here. She glanced at him. I know. That, more than anything, steadied her. 10 seconds, the producer said. The red light blinked once, twice, then held. They were live. Vanessa looked directly into the camera, expression open, unflinching. My name is Vanessa Williams, she began, her voice clear and even. And I want to address the story that's been circulating about my marriage. Phones across the city lit up. Screens refreshed. Comments exploded. In living rooms and offices and cafes, people leaned closer. Catherine froze, watching the feed. Dominic swore under his breath. Vanessa continued, every word deliberate. I understand why there are questions. The timing surprised people. The privacy raised suspicions. And yes, parts of this story have been exaggerated. Brandon's breath caught. But not in the way you've been led to believe. Vanessa said calmly. What began as a private moment between two people became public faster than either of us anticipated. And when it did, we chose discretion, not deception. The chat scrolled faster. She's owning it. That's unexpected. Why do I believe her? Catherine felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't a confession. It was a reclamation. Vanessa paused, just long enough to let the silence work for her. I won't pretend this situation hasn't been complicated, she continued. But I won't allow myself to be reduced to a headline or a rumor. I'm not a strategy. I'm not leverage. I'm a person. The words cut clean. Brandon closed his eyes briefly. Vanessa met the camera again, gaze steady. And I'm here to tell you this story myself because no one else gets to tell it for me. The screen filled with reactions. Support, skepticism, shock. But above all attention, the producer gestured urgently from behind the camera. Vanessa nodded once. She was just getting started. If you're watching this unfold and can't look away, Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and comment the city you're watching from. The truth is still being written. The studio lights hummed softly, steady and indifferent, as Vanessa held the gaze of the camera. She felt the weight of it now, not as pressure, but as presence. Every word she spoke was already traveling outward, multiplying across screens and feeds, reshaping itself in real time. There would be no rewinding this moment. She breathed in, slow and measured. "I want to be very clear," Vanessa said, her voice calm but human, carrying the faintest tremor of honesty. There was exaggeration. There was confusion. But there was no deception. The chat exploded. "What does that mean? Is she admitting it?" "This is different," Vanessa continued, choosing her words with care, not the careful distance of a lawyer, but the deliberate clarity of someone who had decided to be understood. "When Brandon and I first met, it wasn't in front of cameras or contracts," she said. "It was a private moment that became public faster than either of us could control. We didn't plan the attention. We reacted to it." She paused, letting that land. "Did we protect our privacy?" she asked, then nodded. "Yes." "Did that protection create assumptions?" "Absolutely." She leaned forward slightly, eyes bright. "But protecting something fragile isn't the same as inventing it." Something shifted. It was subtle at first, an easing in the tone of the scrolling comments, a softening of the questions. People stopped hunting for contradictions and started listening. Vanessa swallowed, the vulnerability now undeniable. "I've been called a lot of things in the last 24 hours, she said quietly. "A distraction, a strategy, an opportunist." She lifted her chin. "I'm none of those." Across the city, Catherine stared at the screen, her carefully composed smile frozen. The comments beneath the stream were changing, less accusatory, more curious. "She sounds honest. Why does this feel real?" Catherine's phone buzzed with messages from contacts who had promised certainty. "This isn't landing the way we expected. People are siding with her." "No," Catherine whispered. Back in the studio, Vanessa let the silence do its work. "I didn't arrive in this world with connections or influence," she said. "I arrived with questions, with uncertainty, and yes, with fear." She allowed herself a small, rueful smile. "But I also arrived with dignity, and I won't give that up to make someone else more comfortable." The producer glanced toward Brandon. This was the moment. Brandon stepped forward, entering the frame for the first time. The reaction was immediate, screens lighting up, the chat surging. Vanessa turned toward him, surprise flickering across her face. This hadn't been discussed. He placed a hand lightly on the back of her chair, grounding but not possessive. "I want to say something," Brandon said, voice steady. The room seemed to still. "I've spent my career controlling narratives," he continued. "Managing risk, anticipating fallout. And in doing so, I've sometimes forgotten that people aren't variables." He looked at Vanessa, not the camera. "That's on me." The shift was seismic. Vanessa's breath caught. "I asked Vanessa to step into a situation that grew far beyond what either of us anticipated," Brandon said. "She didn't owe me courage. She didn't owe me loyalty. And she certainly didn't owe anyone an explanation." He turned back to the camera. "But she gave all three on her own terms." The comments exploded again, this time unmistakably different. "Wow. He's backing her. This feels genuine." Catherine felt something crack. Her phone buzzed another message, then another. Allies retreating, distancing themselves. The tone had changed. "We may need to reconsider our position." "This is getting messy." Messy. That was the word people used when control slipped. Vanessa met Brandon's eyes, something fragile and unguarded passing between them. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded. "Always." The producer signaled time. Vanessa turned back to the camera for the final moments. "I'm not asking for sympathy," she said. "I'm asking for fairness. Judge me on what you see now, not on what someone else decided I should be." She offered a small, resolute smile. And if that's not enough, then at least know this: I spoke today. Because my story belongs to me. The red light blinked. Once. Twice. Then went dark. The room exhaled. Vanessa sagged slightly, the adrenaline draining from her body all at once. Brandon moved closer instinctively, steadying her without thinking. "You were incredible," he said quietly. She laughed shakily. "I thought I was going to pass out." "You didn't." "I almost did." They shared a look, raw, unfiltered, stripped of pretense. Outside the studio, the world reacted. Headlines shifted. Billionaire's wife speaks a story reclaimed. From scandal to statement. Why the narrative just changed. Public sympathy tilted, then leaned. Catherine closed the stream, her reflection staring back at her from the dark screen. For the first time in a long while, she didn't know what move to make next. Back at the penthouse, the quiet felt unreal. Vanessa stood near the window, city lights blurred below, the enormity of what she'd done settling slowly into her bones. Brandon watched her for a moment, then spoke. "There's something I need to tell you." She turned. He hesitated just a fraction. "Enough to matter. When I said this was strategic," he began, voice low, "I was lying to myself." Her heart stuttered. "I didn't expect to care," he continued. "And that scared me. So I tried to contain it. Label it. Control it." He met her gaze fully now. "I can't do that anymore." The room seemed to hold its breath again, but this time, it was just the two of them. Vanessa didn't speak. She couldn't. Not yet. Because some truths, once spoken, changed everything. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and comment the city you're watching from. The most dangerous truths are still ahead. The penthouse felt different after the cameras were gone. Quieter. Not in the way silence usually settled after a long day, but in the way spaces changed once pretense left them behind. The city still glittered outside the windows, indifferent and endless. But inside, the air held something fragile, unfinished. Vanessa stood near the window, arms folded loosely, watching her reflection overlap with the skyline. She hadn't moved since Brandon spoke. "I didn't expect to care." The words replayed themselves with a steadiness that made them impossible to ignore. Brandon remained where he was, hands resting on the back of a chair, posture rigid with restraint. He looked like a man waiting for impact. "You don't have to say anything," he said finally, voice careful. Vanessa turned slowly. "That's not true," she replied. "I do." She crossed the room, stopping a few feet away from him, not too close, not distant. Deliberate. "You're very good with words when they're useful," she said, "but I want to hear the ones you avoid." His jaw tightened. "All right." He exhaled, the sound uneven. "I've built my life around control," Brandon said. "Not because I enjoy it, but because it's how I survive. I don't leave variables unchecked. I don't improvise, and I don't let emotions dictate outcomes." Vanessa listened, her expression unreadable. "When you walked into that ballroom," he continued, "you were supposed to be a solution, a temporary fix, something clean and contained. And then?" she asked softly. "And then you weren't," he admitted. "You challenged me. You made rooms feel lighter. You made me careless." The word lingered. "I don't like being careless," Brandon said. "It terrifies me." Vanessa nodded slowly. "So you labeled me a strategy?" "Yes." "To protect yourself?" "Yes." She held his gaze. "At my expense." He didn't argue. "That's the part you need to understand," Vanessa said, her voice steady but firm. "I didn't mind pretending. I didn't mind stepping into something uncertain. What I minded was being reduced to a role when I was standing right in front of you." her hand pressed lightly against her chest. I didn't lose my job, my home, and my future just to become someone's convenient narrative. Brandon's throat worked. I know. No, she said gently. You didn't. Not then. She turned away briefly, then faced him again. You talk about fear like it excuses the damage, she continued. It doesn't. Fear explains behavior, it doesn't justify it. He nodded. You're right. The admission was quiet, unadorned. I was wrong, Brandon said. And I'm sorry. The words were simple. They didn't try to persuade or soften. They landed. Vanessa closed her eyes for a moment, letting the apology settle not as absolution, but as acknowledgement. Across the city, Dominic Hale stared at his screen. Frustration etched into every line of his face. The numbers were unmistakable. Public sentiment had shifted, not marginally, decisively. The article had run, yes, but it had been drowned out by Vanessa's voice, Brandon's support, and the ripple effect of authenticity in a space addicted to performance. His phone buzzed again. Investors pulling back. Board wants distance. This angle isn't working. Dominic slammed the phone onto the desk. He had lost leverage. Not because he lacked information, but because information no longer controlled the story. In another part of the city, Catherine sat alone at a mirrored vanity. Makeup still perfect, expression anything but. Her phone lay face down beside her, unread messages piling up, invitations quietly withdrawn, calls unanswered. She replayed the live stream in her head, Vanessa's calm, Brandon's unanticipated loyalty, the way the audience had leaned in instead of turning away. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had expected chaos. She had not expected dignity. Catherine exhaled sharply and stood, pacing the room. This isn't over, she muttered to no one in particular. But the conviction rang hollow. Back at the penthouse, the conversation had shifted. Vanessa sat now, legs crossed, posture relaxed but alert. Brandon took the opposite chair, no longer standing above her. Equal. I don't want strategy anymore, he said quietly. Not with you. She studied him. Then what do you want? He hesitated, really hesitated this time. Honesty, he said, even when it costs me. That's expensive, she replied. I can afford it. A faint smile tugged at her lips before she stopped it. Honesty goes both ways, Vanessa said. If we're doing this, whatever this is, it doesn't erase what happened. I wouldn't ask it to. And I won't be quiet to make you comfortable. I wouldn't want you to be. Silence stretched between them, not tense but thoughtful. You scared me, Vanessa admitted finally. Not with the headlines. With the way you spoke about me when you thought I wasn't listening. Brandon's gaze softened. I won't do that again. Promises are easy, she said. I know. He leaned forward slightly. But I'm willing to earn it. Another pause. Outside, the city pulsed on, indifferent to confessions, oblivious to the quiet reckoning happening several stories above it. Brandon straightened, resolve settling into his posture. There's something else, he said. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. You're full of those tonight. He almost smiled. When this started, he continued, I asked you to pretend, to step into a role because it was convenient. Yes, she said. I remember. I'm not asking that anymore. Her pulse quickened. Then what are you asking? He stood, not looming, just present. I'm asking you something real, Brandon said, voice low but clear. Vanessa rose as well, heart pounding now, the air between them charged with possibility and risk. He met her gaze. No calculation left. Will you stay? He asked. Not because it's useful, but because you want to. The question hung there unprotected, unanswered. And for the first time since the lie began, there was no script to follow. If this chapter struck a chord, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and comment the city you're watching from. The final choice is coming. Vanessa didn't answer right away. Brandon's question hung between them, bare, unguarded, and terrifying in its simplicity. Will you stay because you want to? She looked at him for a long moment, really looked. Not at the billionaire whose name could steady markets or shatter reputations, but at the man standing in front of her without armor. No strategy, no performance, just a question he couldn't protect himself from. I need to say something first, Vanessa said quietly. Take all the time you need, Brandon replied. She exhaled slowly, grounding herself. When I walked into that ballroom, she began. I didn't belong anywhere, not in my job, not in my relationship, not even in my own future. I was invisible, quietly erased by circumstances I didn't choose. She met his eyes. And then you asked me to pretend. Brandon didn't interrupt. At first, it felt like rescue, Vanessa continued. A distraction. A way to stand somewhere warm while everything else burned. She shook her head gently. But pretending has a cost. And I paid it with pieces of myself I worked hard to protect. Her voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. So before I answer you, she said, I need to choose myself. Not the version of me that survives by adapting. Not the one that fits into someone else's narrative. She took a step back, not away, but into her own space. I won't stay because it's comfortable, or exciting, or because the world expects it. Brandon's jaw tightened, fear flickering across his face, but he stayed silent. I'll only stay, Vanessa finished, if I'm not smaller in the process. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of truth. Brandon nodded slowly. That's fair, he said. More than fair. He straightened. Something decisive settling into his posture, not control, but clarity. I've spent my life protecting an image, Brandon said. Curating it. Defending it. Hiding behind it. He let out a breath. And for a long time that worked. He looked at her. But it also cost me something. I just didn't know what until you walked into it. Vanessa felt her chest tighten. I don't want to go back to that. Brandon continued. I don't want to win at the expense of honesty, or hide behind silence when truth is harder. He stepped closer but stopped at her boundary. If staying with me means shrinking, he said, then you shouldn't. A beat. But if it means standing beside me fully, openly, without pretending, then that's what I'm choosing. Authenticity over image. The choice wasn't loud. It was irrevocable. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. All right, she said. Brandon's breath caught. I won't promise forever, Vanessa continued. I won't promise certainty, but I will promise this: I won't disappear for you, and I won't ask you to disappear for me. A slow smile spread across his face. Not polished, not practiced, real. That's all I want, he said. She stepped forward this time, and for the first time since the lie began, when he reached for her hand, it wasn't part of a performance. Across the city and the internet, the aftermath unfolded. The elite world adjusted the way it always did, quietly, efficiently, without apology. Invitations reappeared. Conversations softened. The same people who had once whispered now nodded with approval, but something fundamental had shifted. Vanessa Williams was no longer an accessory to power. She was recognized as her own force. Foundations invited her to speak not as the billionaire's wife, but as a woman who had reclaimed her narrative in public and survived. Boardrooms listened when she spoke, not because of who stood beside her, but because of how she carried herself. Catherine withdrew. Not dramatically, not publicly. She simply stopped being everywhere. Her name still carried weight, but it no longer controlled the room. Dominic's influence waned faster than he expected. Without scandal to fuel him, his leverage evaporated. Power, it turned out, didn't survive honesty very well. And Jennifer celebrated like only a best friend could. She burst into Vanessa's new apartment, smaller than the penthouse, sunnier. Chosen, deliberately waving her phone in the air. "I told you," she announced triumphantly. "I told you leaving the house would change everything." Vanessa laughed, genuine and unrestrained. "You bribed me with free food." "And I was right," Jennifer said smugly. "Admit it." Vanessa smiled. "You were." Later that evening, standing alone on her balcony, Vanessa looked out at the city again. It no longer felt like it was watching her. It felt like it was waiting. She thought of the woman she'd been when this started, quiet, careful, hoping not to be noticed. She thought of the lie that had given her visibility and the truth that had given her power. She didn't regret pretending, but she was grateful it was over. Because now, whatever came next would be real. And that mattered more than any headline. She arrived invisible. She left unforgettable. If this story stayed with you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on your notifications, and comment the city you're watching from. This is just the beginning and you won't want to miss what comes next.